What's up, everybody? Piscean here. And in this video I want to go over advanced astrology, genius, origins, and omens. And what I mean by that is explaining some new aspects in orbs, as well as midpoint varieties, decanates of planets, angles and fixed stars, natal aspect, decanates, and integrated theory. So this right here is going to be an original textbook of harmonic, cosmobiological, and traditional synthesis for the serious practitioner. But before we even get really into this is crafted by Grok AI, and I also will be going over a bigger astro book that's going to be 55 pages long, in depth, in detail, and rigorous, with technical precision. And it's crafted by Perplexity AI. So please subscribe, like, comment, share if you dare and care. If you want to see more of my videos and learn astrology for free. All right, let's keep on going here. So I want to go into these contents here. As we see, there's about 8 sections we're going to go over in detail. And we also know in most of my videos I like to have the appendix or appendixes. So we're going to go over origins and omens, the primordial language of the sky, classical aspects and the geometry of relationship, new aspects, harmonics and emerging theories, as well as orbs, historical moieties, modern calibrations and theories of strength, midpoints, varieties, ascendant interfaces, and fixed star midpoints, as well as decanates, the 36 faces, and their application to every natal factor, as well as natal aspect decanates and integrated configurations, as well as synthesis, which will be practiced in the living chart. We see our appendix is going to be a reference tables of aspects, orbs, midpoints, and decans. So let's jump into this. And before we continue, I'm just going to make sure that this is on Do Not Disturb. I'm going to turn off dark mode. Alright. So, first we have the origins and omens here. And we see that astrology did not begin as a psychological mirror. It began as omenology. Okay. The discipline of reading of celestial signs as messages concerning terrestrial events. In Mesopotamia, from the Old Babylonian period onward, the night sky was treated as a living tablet on which the gods inscribed warnings and favors. An eclipse, a planetary station, a conjunction near a particular fixed star, or the appearance of a comet were not abstract symbols. They were concrete omens whose meaning was cataloged in series such as the Enuma, Enu, Enlil. Okay. Which I've talked about this in previous videos. The earliest systematic celestial omens already distinguished between the quality of the phenomenon and its location. A lunar eclipse in a particular part of the sky carried different implications according to the month, the direction of shadow, and the concurrent behavior of the planets. This dual attention to the nature of the body and to its angular or positional relationship is the seat of both aspect doctrine and the later theory of orbs. So, getting into Hellenistic astrology, which inherited this omen framework and transformed it under the influence of Greek geometry and Egyptian temple science. The sky became a circular state of 360 degrees, so planets were said to quote-unquote see or quote-unquote testify to one another by angular distance. Ptolemy's Tetrabiblos formalized the 5 classical aspects, such as conjunction. All right, you got your sextile, you got your square, you got your trine, you got your opposition as optical and harmonic relationships, while retaining the older language of familiarity and hostility. Yet the omen rune never disappeared. Even in sophisticated natal practice, a tight aspect or a planet on a sensitive degree still functions as an omen of a specific quality of experience. Okay. So the modern recovery of fixed star astrology, of decanates, and of midpoint techniques is in many respects a return to this omen sensibility. A planet conjunct a bright fixed star within a degree is no longer merely quote-unquote influenced by the star's nature. It is the carrier of an intensified omen whose traditional lore from Ptolemy, the Arabic authors, and later Robeson and Brady supplies the interpretive key. Likewise, a planet occupying a midpoint or falling in a particular decan of a sign reactivates the ancient conviction that every degree in every geometric relationship carries specific nameable significance. In this textbook, therefore, treats aspects, orbs, midpoints, and decanates not as original refinements, but as successive refinements of the same primordial act. Reading the sky is a structured language of omens that speak both of character and of event. Okay? So, in this video, we're going to only go over a few more pages here before we're finished, because this is what Grok came up with. So, using my prompt, but classical aspects in the geometry of relationship. So, it says an aspect is an angular relationship measured along the ecliptic between two factors, being the planets, angles, nodes, or fixed stars. The classical 5 aspects arise from the simple divisions of the circle by 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6. So now we see the aspect. I'll just use that. The angle, division, and traditional character. Okay, so up close we see the conjunction here, which is a 0 degrees angle, with the division being 1, and its traditional character, or its TC, being fusion, intensification, and identity. And then we have our sextile, which is 60 degrees of an angle, division 6, bringing opportunity and ease of cooperation. Our square, 90 degrees of an angle, 4, regressive division, tension, dynamic challenge, and action. Our trine is 120 degrees angle, division 3, harmony, flow, natural talent. In our opposition, 180 degrees to polarity, awareness, and projection. And as we can see on the bottom, we have our table 2.1, the 5 Ptolemaic aspects. Okay. So Ptolemy grounded these aspects in both optical analogy, being planets quote unquote looking at one another, and in the natural sympathies of the signs. Planets and signs of the same element form trines, while planets and signs of the same modality form squares. Planets and signs of complementary gender and related elements form sextiles. The conjunction and opposition stand outside this elemental logic as pure angular intensifications. In practice, the classical aspects remain the backbone of chart reading. Their relative strength is modulated by 3 primary factors. Okay, exactness: the smaller the orb, the stronger the aspect. Application versus separation, applying aspects are traditionally stronger, and the dignity or angularity of the planets involved. A partile, which is exact, applying square between angular planets outweighs a wide separating trine between cadent planets. Next we go over our new aspects, harmonics and emerging theories, which I really enjoy this section here. So Johannes Kepler, seeking a more refined geometry of the heavens, introduced additional divisions of the circle. His new aspects being the quintile, 72 degrees, the biquintile, 144 degrees, semi-square, 45 degrees, sesquiquadrate, 135 degrees, and others, were later systematized by harmonic astrology, especially through the work of John Addy. In harmonic theory, every integer division of 360 degrees generates a distinct family of aspects whose qualitative meaning derives from the number itself. So we have our principal, modern, and harmonic aspects here. We see our aspects, as well as our angles, harmonics, and the core meanings. Okay? So for example, our semi-sextile, an angle of 30 degrees, a harmonic of 12, and bringing mild friction, adjustment, seat of growth. Okay? Our decile, semi-quintile, 36 degrees of an angle, 10th harmonic, subtle talent, specialized skill. Our novile, 40 degrees of an angle, 9th harmonic, initiation, spiritual or creative germination. Our semi-square, 45 degrees of an angle, 8th harmonic, friction, irritation, forced action. Septile is 51.43 degrees, 7th harmonic, inspiration, obsession, fated quality. Quintile here, 72 degrees, angle, 5th harmonic, creative genius, unique talent and style. Our biquintile, 144 degrees, our fifth harmonic, creative expression requiring conscious craft. Our quincunx in conjunct, 150 degrees, our 12th harmonic, adjustment, health, compulsion to integrate. Our sesquiquadrate, 135 degrees, our 8th harmonic, acute tension, breakthrough under pressure. And we have our quintessile Kepler, 165 degrees with a Planck harmonic obsession, separation, and compulsive drive. And we see this table 3.1 is selected modern and harmonic aspects. All right. Excuse me. So the fifth harmonic, the quintile family, is especially associated with creative talent and the capacity to perceive patterns others miss. While the seventh harmonic, septile family, carries a quality of irrevocable inspiration or compulsion, often experienced as quote-unquote fated. The eighth harmonic, the octave family, being 45 degrees, 90 degrees, 135 degrees, intensifies the square's demand for action and resolution. And higher harmonics, being the 9th, 11th, 13th, require extremely tight orbs and are best reserved for advanced research or for charts already rich in classical structure. So a practical rule here is to introduce a new aspect only when the classical skeleton of the chart has been thoroughly read, and only when the aspect is tight, generally under 2 degrees, okay? So otherwise the proliferation of minor aspects dilutes rather than refines judgment. Alrighty, onto orbs. So an orb is the allowable deviation from exactitude within which an aspect is still considered operative. No single universal table exists. Orbs have always been a matter of tradition, technique, and the individual practitioner's experience. So now we're going to go over the historical foundations here. I see medieval and Renaissance authors employ the doctrine of planetary moieties, being half orbs, okay? So each planet was assigned a sphere of light, all right? An aspect existed when the moieties of 2 planets touched or overlapped. Typical moiety values, drawn from Lilly and earlier sources, were approximately the Sun at 17 degrees, Moon at 12 degrees, Venus at 8 degrees, Jupiter at 12 degrees, Mercury at 7 degrees, Mars at 7 degrees, Saturn at 8 degrees. And fixed stars of the first magnitude received moieties of roughly 6 through 7.5 degrees, while the combined moiety determined whether an aspect was formed. The nature of the aspect itself was still judged by the classical angles. We have our modern practice here. So contemporary natal astrology generally abandons pure moiety tables in favor of aspect-specific orbs that also take account of planetary dignity and the nature of the technique. Okay? So we have our aspect type, our luminaries, personal planets, social outer, and angle stars. Okay? So we see here, for example, the conjunction and opposition within 8 through 12 degrees, the luminaries and its personal planets being 6 through 9 degrees, social outer being 5 through 8 degrees, and the angles stars 3 through 6 degrees divided by which lesser than 1 through 2 degrees. Okay? And then we have our square and trine, luminaries 6 through 9 degrees, personal planets 5 through 8 degrees, social outer 4 through 7 degrees, angle stars 3 through 5 degrees. Okay. In our sextile, luminaries 4 through 7 degrees, personal planets 3 through 6 degrees, social outer 3 through 5 degrees, angle stars 2 through 4 degrees. Minor 45 degrees, 135 degrees, 150 degrees, and our luminaries 2 through 3 degrees, personal planets 1.5 through 2.5 degrees, social outer 1 through 2 degrees, and angles and stars 1 through 1.5 degrees. Harmonics 72 degrees, 40 degrees, 51 degrees, luminaries 1.5 through 2 degrees, personal planets 1 through 2 degrees, social outer would be lesser than 1.5 degrees, and angle stars lesser than 1 degrees. Okay, and we see it's all blank for the fixed star conjunction, luminaries, personal planets, and social outer. The angles and stars 0.5 through 1.5 degrees mag dependent. In our midpoint occupation, blank for luminaries, personal planets, and social outer, but 0.5 through 1.5 degrees hard aspects preferred. Okay? And this is table 4.1, suggested working orbs by factor and aspect class. So this is really, really cool, and I really appreciate using Grok AI lately because it's coming up with some brilliant visuals and how I want things to be presented when I'm speaking about advanced astrology here. So, several theoretical principles govern the choice of orb. See, first, closer is stronger. So strength rises steeply as the aspect approaches exactitude and falls more gradually as it widens. Many practitioners treat 0 through 1 degrees as maximum intensity, while 1 through 3 degrees as strong and wider orbs as secondary. Applying versus separating. So an applying aspect, which is faster planet moving toward exactitude, is traditionally given a slightly wider orbing is considered more dynamic. Technique determines tightness. So cosmobiology and Iranian astrology routinely use 1 through 2 degrees or less for midpoints and hard aspects. Psychological or humanistic schools may retain broader classical orbs. And fixed stars and sensitive points demand narrow orbs. Because stars are effectively point sources, conjunctions beyond 1 through 1.5 degrees lose reliability. Okay? The same principle applies to midpoints and to most harmonic aspects. Alright, let's talk about midpoints in more detail here. And we're almost going to be finished with this one. And then in my next video, I'm going to show you the 55-page Astro book, and you're going to be blown away. So, the midpoints here. A midpoint is a zodiacal degree lying exactly halfway between two factors along the shorter arc. Oops. When a third factor occupies that degree, or forms a hard aspect to it, the energies of the two original factors are synthesized and activated through the third. This technique was revived and systematized by Alfred Wheat in the Hamburg School, then popularized in the English-speaking world by Reinhold Eberton's Cosmobiology. We have our calculation here. Convert both positions to absolute longitude. Okay, that's 0 through 360 degrees. That's our zodiacal wheel, or ZW, if you will. And then add them and divide by 2. If the result differs from either position by more than 90 degrees, add or subtract 180 degrees to obtain the near midpoint. Its opposite is the far midpoint. In practice, the near midpoint is the primary, and the far midpoint is considered when a planet or angle falls upon it. Okay? In our priority hierarchy of midpoints. So not every midpoint carries equal weight. A practical ranking for natal work is in these 5 steps. So first we see the sun, moon, the core integration of conscious purpose and emotional need. Next we have midpoints involving the ascendant or midheaven, being, and I'll just color code these here. Whether it's the sun and the ascendant, or the moon and the ascendant, sun midheaven, moon midheaven, or ascendant midheaven, okay? And next, midpoints between personal planets, whether it's Mercury, Venus, or Mars, as well as the luminaries or the angles. And midpoints linking personal planets to social or outer planets. Midpoints among outer planets, useful mainly when tightly occupied or activated by transit. Alright, so now let's talk about the ascendant and angle midpoints. So midpoints that include the ascendant describe how the native meets the world and forms relationships. First, we'll talk about the sun and the ascendant midpoint. It speaks of personal presence and physical vitality and encounters, of course. Alright? Moon ascendant of emotional atmosphere and the people who populate the immediate environment. Mercury ascendant of communicative style. Venus ascendant of aesthetic and relational attraction. Mars ascendant of assertive or competitive bearing. The ascendant midheaven midpoint is especially potent. It links the axis of the self, which is the ascendant, with the axis of vocation and public image, which is the midheaven, and often indicates the style in which the native seeks recognition or authority. Fixed star midpoints in planetary pictures. Although classical fixed star work emphasizes direct conjunction, the midpoint technique can be extended to stars of sufficient magnitude. A planet occupying the midpoint of 2 fixed stars, or let's say a fixed star occupying the midpoint of 2 planets, creates a rare and highly specific configuration because, why? Stellar orbs are already narrow. The midpoint orb should be kept under 1 degrees. Such pictures are best interpreted by combining the traditional natures of the stars with the planetary symbolism, treating the result as a concentrated omen rather than a diffuse psychological trait. In cosmobiology, the preferred aspects to midpoints are the hard sec. And we've talked about hard aspects on here. Let me just do this. Alright. So we're talking about conjunctions, oppositions, squares, semi-squares, and sesquiquadrate, which are all within roughly 1 through 1.5 degrees. Soft aspects to midpoints are generally disregarded as too weak to carry the synthetic force. Decanates, or decans. Okay, so each zodiacal sign of 30 degrees is divided into 3 decanates, or faces. All right, that's what we're talking about here, of 10 degrees each. The first decan being 0 through 10 degrees, and it carries the purest expression of the sign. The second being 10 through 20 degrees introduces the influence of the next sign of the same element. And the third being 20 through 30 degrees, introducing the influence of the remaining sign of that element. And this is the Chaldean or triplicity ordering commonly used in modern Western practice. An alternative planetary ruler system assigns the decans to the 7 traditional planets in Chaldean order, beginning with Mars for the first decan of Aries. So decanates refine the qualitative quote-unquote flavor of any natal factor that falls within them, whether it's a planet, angle, node, or fixed star. A planet in the second decan of a sign is colored by the modality and elemental quality of the next sign of the same triplicity, producing a more complex or transitional expression. And we have table 6.1 here, elemental triplicity decanate rulers. The signs, from Aries to Pisces. And a lot of people would say, why are you using AI to make your videos? And it's like, AI integrated astrology is the future. AI integrated everything is the future. You have to get with the times. So Aries, we see the first decan for Aries, 0 through 10 degrees, it's pure Aries. Meanwhile, its second decan, 10 through 20 degrees, is Leo influence. And its third decan has that Sagittarius influence. For Taurus, we see its first decan is Taurus pure. And it is the same thing with 0 through 10 degrees. If you have that first decan of any zodiac sign, you're going to get that pure sign's essence because you're in the beginning of it. But there could also be aspects and whatnot. We're just talking about the decans in general. So from the first decan of Taurus, it goes into that Virgo influence, and then in its third decan has that Capricorn influence. Gemini, from Gemini goes to being like Libra in its second decan, to Aquarius in its third decan. From Cancer, it goes to Scorpio in its second decan, to Pisces in its third decan. The influence is there. Leo goes to Sagittarius in its second decan and Aries in its third decan. Virgo goes to Capricorn in its second decan, then Taurus in its third decan. Has that influence and that energy. Libra transforms into Aquarius in its second decan, then to Gemini in its third decan. Scorpio in its first decan, then to Pisces in its second, then Cancer in its third decan. Sagittarius in its first decan, then Aries in its second, then Leo in its third decan. Capricorn in its first, then Taurus in its second, then Virgo in its third. Aquarius in its first, Gemini in its second, and Libra in its third. And Pisces in its first, Cancer in its second, and Scorpio in its third. Simple, simple. Application to planets and angles. Every natal planet and angle occupies a specific decan here. So recording that information immediately after noting the sign and house yields a finer portrait. We have an example here, y'all. Sun in the third decan of Leo, 20 through 30 degrees, carries a strong Aries coloring, okay? More pioneering, direct, and competitive than a pure first decan Leo sun. Ascendant in the second decan of Scorpio's tinged with Pisces, softening the intensity with receptivity and imaginative depth. The midheaven in a particular decan colors the public image and vocational path with the secondary signs qualities. Fixed stars and decanates. So, because fixed stars are measured by their ecliptic longitude, each star also falls within a decan of its sign. When a natal planet, or let's say an angle, conjuncts a fixed star, the shared decan supplies an additional layer of meaning. A planet, for example, conjunct Regulus, early Leo, first decan, operates in the pure Leonine register of the star. A planet conjunct a star in the third decan of a sign inherits the transitional quality of that face. This refinement is especially useful when several stars of similar magnitude lie close together. Natal aspect decanates and integrated configurations. Also, guys, stay tuned, subscribe, like, comment, share if you don't care, because I will be making a video about Taurus Ascendant, and specifically those of us that have had to live with Taurus Ascendant and algal aspects and natal aspects with algal in that Ascendant placement. Stay tuned. So natal aspect decans and integrated configurations, and the aspect itself may be said to occupy a decan when the midpoint of the two aspecting bodies, or the degree, of exactitude, falls within a given 10 degree space. More practically, each planet participating in an aspect already occupies its own decan. The interaction of those two decan flavors constitutes the natal aspect's decanate signature. For example, Mars in the second decan of Aries with that Leo influence, square Saturn in the third decan of Capricorn with that Virgo influence. What do we see here? The square is not merely Mars-Saturn tension. Why? Because it is a Leonine drive for recognition meeting a Virgo in demand for precision and service. Imagine if you meet someone with Virgo, Sun, Leo rising. For example, my sister. They're very headstrong. They're very egocentric. They're very, we need to go to work. And if you don't have a job, well, maybe you're not trying hard enough. The resulting dynamic is ambition that must prove itself through meticulous competence rather than pure force. When an aspect is also a midpoint picture, third planet on the midpoint of the two, the decan of the midpoint itself becomes a stage on which the synthesis occurs. Thus, a sun-moon midpoint occupied by Mercury in a particular decan yields a mind whose style of integrating will and feeling is colored by that face. The same logic extends to fixed star aspects. A planet conjunct a fixed star within a shared decan and simultaneously forming a classical or harmonic aspect to another planet creates a multi-layered omen whose interpretation draws on star lore, decan symbolism, and aspect nature simultaneously. Excuse me. So stay tuned, y'all, because I have so many videos to make. Holy shit. I have so many ideas in regards to astrology and what I want to talk about on here. And I've been lagging. All right. So we're going to finish up on this and then get into the next one. But let's talk about synthesis practice in the living chart. So advanced technique is worthless without disciplined prioritization. Okay, the following sequence is recommended for any natal chart. First, we see establish the classical skeleton. And that's the luminaries, angles, major aspects, and angular planets. Next, we see note the decanate of every planet and angle. Record the secondary elemental coloring. Identify the strongest midpoints, especially those involving the sun, the moon, the ascendant, and the midheaven, as well as any planets occupying them within 1 through 1.5 degrees. Examine the tight fixed star conjunctions being lesser than 1.5 degrees and note their shared decans. Only then introduce selected minor and harmonic aspects that are both tight and relevant to the already established themes. Treat the whole as a living omen structure. Every exact configuration is a specific message, not merely a psychological tendency. Orbs should be tightened rather than loosened when moving from classical to midpoint, harmonic, or stellar work. The goal is not to generate an exhaustive list of every possible contact, but to isolate the configurations whose exactness and symbolic coherence mark them as the primary carriers of meaning. Okay? In this way, the practitioner recovers the original genius of astrology, the capacity to read the sky as a precise multi-layered language of omens in which geometry, degree, and stellar presence all speak. And next, we have our appendix that Grog generated for us. Quick reference tables here. So, in Appendix A, we have aspect, angles, and suggested maximum orbs. Natal. And this is just an example here, so you guys can clearly see what I'm trying to show you. With the aspects, the exact degrees, the max orb general, and notes, okay? So for example, the conjunction. We know it's 0 degrees exact, the max orb general being 8 through 10 degrees, and notes wider for the sun and moon, okay? Semi-sextile, 30 degrees exact, 2 degrees, max orb, minor. Semi-square, 45 degrees, 2 degrees, hard minor. Sextile, 60 degrees, 5 through 6 degrees, major. Quintile, 72 degrees, 1.5 through 2 degrees, harmonic 5. fifth harmonic. Square, 90 degrees, 7 through 8 degrees, major. Trine, 120 degrees, 7 through 8 degrees, major. Sesquiquadrate, 135 degrees through 2 degrees, max orb general, and hard minor. Biquintile, 144 degrees, 1.5 through 2 degrees, fifth harmonic. Quincunx, 150 degrees, 2 through 3 degrees, adjustment, and opposition, 180 degrees, 8 through 10 degrees, wider for the sun and moon. Alrighty. People, let's get into it. Midpoint orb guidelines. Occupation of a midpoint, conjunction or opposition to the midpoint degree, 0.5 through 1.5 degrees. Hard aspects to a midpoint being a square, semi-square, or a sesquiquadrate, 1 through 1.5 degrees. Soft aspects to midpoints are generally omitted in cosmobiological practice. Fixed star conjunction orbs by magnitude approximate. So we have the magnitude, suggested orb, and examples. So first we have the first magnitude of brighter, suggested orb 1.0 through 1.5 degrees, and examples are these fixed stars here. So Sirius, Canopus, Arcturus, Vega, Capella, Rigel, Procyon, Betelgeuse, Aldebaran, Antares, Spica, and Regulus. The second magnitude, 0.75 through 1.0 degrees, suggested orb, many bright constellation stars. And then we have third magnitude and fainter, 0.5 through 0.75 degrees, used only with additional confirmation. Okay, this textbook is offered as a living synthesis, not a final dogma. The practitioner is invited to test every orb, every midpoint, and every decadent coloring against the evidence of real charts and real lives. Only through such discipline encountered does the language of the sky become fluent again. Thank you for watching this video with peace and love, Piscean. I'll see you in the next one, teaching you more advanced astrology for free.